So we're going to just move right into our final speaker and then a closing. So please hang on and have some final thoughts with us. I'd like to introduce Regent Nolbert Chavez, who is also Director of External Initiatives and also our HSI initiatives here at CU Denver. And he's going to talk to us a bit about moving forward.
Okay, thank you. So I'm the only one standing in between you and going home. So, and I'm sure it's been an exhausting, probably emotionally exhausting as well, 2 days. So we won't take all the time that's been allotted, but I do just want to share with you some of the conversations and ideas and projects that we're talking about doing and the ways in which we're approaching the future. And to begin that, I think it's important to think about sort of our definition, your own definition of what home means. And for some, that's their house. For some, it's their neighborhood. For some, it's their neighbors or the location that they live. But if you really boil it down, it's a feeling, really, what home means. And you can live in a big, beautiful place and not really feel like that place is your home because it doesn't provide you that feeling. And I bring that up because I've had conversations since we started these efforts who have tried to defend and rationalize their actions, the actions of many who were responsible by saying, well, you know, there were so many homes that were in disrepair and didn't have bathrooms and didn't have running water and had been destroyed and affected by the flood. And we were giving them a better place to live. I just, and that may be true for some, that may be true, but for some, it would never be enough. You could never give them another place that would replace their home. And the stories that I've heard through the Museum of Memories, and we've heard a little bit about that History Colorado has done. The thing that everyone talked about was the feeling of home. And the connection that they had with their neighbors. I had a conversation with Rita Gomez, who her and her family lived in 1050 9th Street. And she told me the story of every day her father would drive into the back with his truck and they would hear him and they would open the window in the front and jump out to get away from him. It was the cutest story and it captured her childhood. It was the story of her childhood and all of her cousins. And that's the feeling that you can never replace. And it's important for us all to know that that's what we need to honor going forward. And I talked yesterday a little bit about honoring our commitments, right? And the promises that were made. And that was just the spark really that got us on this path. And we're all now called to continue that and to build on that. Part of that we did this earlier this year, this past legislative session, when all three institutions got together and we asked Representative Carrie Tipper and Representative Serena Gonzalez Gutierrez to carry a bill to get some money from the state to support the scholarships that all three institutions had already committed to. And some said, well, why do you need to do that if you've already committed to doing it? And the answer is the state was also responsible. And so many others were as well, the city, the church, the courts. And I believe it's time everyone lives up to their responsibilities. And that was our attempt to ask them to live up to part of theirs. It's certainly not enough. It won't last forever. Those funds won't last forever, but they're an expression of living up to their responsibility. And we did so intentionally by splitting the $2 million evenly among the institutions. Because as we went through the process last fall and made the commitment, all three institutions made the commitment to fund those scholarships in perpetuity. The Community College of Denver was in the worst financial shape. They've had to cut budgets quite a bit this last year. And they also have the lowest number of students and the lowest tuition. And so we split it evenly so that their $666,000 would last them longer because they were in greater need. And we were happy to do that. And hopefully now we're all in a position to begin to find and qualify, if you will. That's not the right word, but make sure that those students that qualify for the scholarship get that scholarship. And that's one of the things that, if we look at our efforts as focused on the past, the present, and the future, focusing on honoring our past is the first step, and we've done a lot in that regard. But now we need to think about the present, and the present being, how do we make sure those students actually get their scholarships and make sure that that's a smooth process. And so we've gotten together with folks from the community and the three institutions, and are working towards putting a welcome center, if you will. I don't know what it'll be called, but a place in the library where families and students can go, where a lot of the information that we heard about today can be available. I think Virginia Castro has about 50 boxes of things that she would probably like to be kept and stored and memorialized. And so we're working in that way to create that space and to make it available as soon as possible. I, for one, am impatient. I'm not the type of person that's willing to say, yeah, let's talk about it for a year and then raise money for 5 years and then maybe someday we'll have a space. Nope, I don't want that. I want a space today. We have space. Let's find it and maybe work towards the future permanent location. But I don't believe we should wait a single day for what we deserve. And part of, I'll just share a quick story with you. Part of the information that's available that we all should have, especially for students who are trying to make sure they qualify. I was looking online to find Rita Gomez's contact, her name, actually. I didn't know her name. Because as we begin to renovate and restore homes on 9th Street, which I'll talk about, I wanted to invite her and her family to do a blessing, which we've done at 1068 and other houses, but I wanted to invite her and her family to do that. But I didn't know how to reach her. Anyway, I was looking online, and Metro had done a great deal of research to list all the names of all the families that had lived in all the houses. But I didn't know how it worked, and I was doing it the wrong way. I found all that information listed by name alphabetically. And I thought, wow, this is going to take me forever to cross-check every address. But since I was there, I thought I would look and see if there were any Chavez's, Simon Chavez. And I was blown away to find the name of my uncle, Nolbert Chavez, who lived at 1015 9th Street in 1949. I had no idea. And I was able to, he's still alive. My dad and he came and we visited and we sat on the bench in front of 1015. And I was hoping he would remember, he has dementia. I was hoping he would remember living there, but he didn't. But I have a wonderful picture that I plan to put up somewhere on 9th Street of him in front of 1015. But that information is key to the future of our students and the descendants of the displaced Aurarians to get what they deserve. And so I'm grateful to have found it. I actually found Rita's name not through that information, but through a Denver Post article Elizabeth Hernandez put together, and she gave me Rita's name. So I was pleased about that. Back to the present, what we're planning to do and what we have begun is to take ownership. And when I say we, I mean CU Denver. We are taking responsibility for the 6 homes that we occupy on 9th Street. There are 13 homes that were saved, and we occupy 6 of those. 4 of them are occupied by AHEC, Auraria Higher Education Center, and 3 by Metro. CCD doesn't have any on 9th Street, but all of 9th Street is in their neighborhood, so they're still close by. And we've raised some money to begin the restoration of 1050 9th Street. And we are following the same process that Historic Denver, Historic Denver did back in the 70s. And what they did was they approached the city and said, we'd like to save a portion of the homes. We can do it in many different ways, but they decided to select that one block. And the city said, sure, you can do it as long as you raise all the money and do all the work. And so they started with 1015 9th Street, which in my opinion is the prettiest, that's one of the prettiest houses on 9th Street. And they restored that single house as a demonstration and invited the community to come and see what the possibilities were. And they had to raise $1 million at the time, and in today's terms, that would be about $6 million to restore the exterior of those homes, which they were successful at doing. And so we're following the same process and the same model. We're starting with 1050 because it's one of the smallest ones, and it's also got some historical significance because, as I've read, it is supposed to be the oldest brick home in Denver. It was built in 1876, and they call it the Centennial House because of that. And it happened to be turned over to the state in 1976, so 100 years after it was built. But we plan to have space in 1050 for community and community gatherings. It's not a big house, so they won't be hundreds of people, but certainly a place for the community to gather and meet. And it will launch our efforts in that regard over time for the other 5 houses as well. 1050 is the only house on the west side of the street, and the others are all on the east side. And that process is coinciding with CU Denver's 50-year anniversary. And as Chancellor Marks has said, we can't tell CU Denver's story without telling the story of 9th Street and the Aurarian community and the displacement. And so it will be interwoven with this year-long storytelling about CU Denver. And on January 11th, which is the actual anniversary date of birth date of CU Denver, we'll have tours of 1050 9th Street, and you can see the progress. We won't be done, but you'll be able to see the progress. And our goal is to finish the construction and restoration and renovation by the end of the semester this year. And so we'll be working very hard to try and meet that deadline so that at the end of the year, we can conclude with an event there. But in the meantime, as we begin that process, I'd like to invite you all actually to another blessing of sorts of 1050 as we begin the process of renovating the house. That's going to be on the 28th of October, and it will be at the house itself. As I said, we've done a private ceremony for Rita and her family, but we would like to do something that involves all of the community, and especially the displaced Aurarians themselves and their families, who've been so incredibly supportive and involved. And as we think about the future, my focus is and will be on the park, because that space is, in my opinion, that the whole 9th Street Park is a sacred place. All too often, communities that have been displaced, there's nothing left but the memories. They're wiped out. They build a stadium over the neighborhood or something else. And so in that way, we're really very lucky to have those homes as a testament to the neighborhood that lived there. And as I've said before, the trees, to me, that are now mature trees, the branches always conjure the image of welcoming arms that are asking us to come back and engage. And so for me and others, I would love to see us vision a plan for 9th Street Park. And that involves a lot of different things, but it has to start with how we ask people to come back, right? So we say, here's this wonderful park, $7.50 to park, please, right? It's not really that welcoming. How in the world, or why in the world would a family say, well, I'd like to go spend some time at 9th Street Park, but I have to pay? I'll go to La Alma Lincoln Park, or I'll go to La Raza Park, or I'll go to another park where I don't have to pay to park. So we have to think about those things as well as the messages that we send and the way in which we create opportunities for community to reclaim that space. And so we've talked about bringing planners and other experts who have a commitment to community and memories and those kinds of ways in which they engage. I'm thinking of a gentleman that we brought recently to campus by the name of James Rojas, who's a planner who went to MIT and he wrote a book about Latino urbanism, and he's done work in Denver on Morrison Road and throughout the country in communities of color and displaced communities in particular. That's been his area. And we want to do it right. And we want to do it first by asking folks what they want. Because what typically happens is in a planning process led by a city, for example, the city comes to the community and says, guess what? We baked you a cake. What flavor would you like? We never ask, do you want a cake? And that's the problem, is we need to start with what is it that you want and begin there instead of making assumptions and then wondering why folks don't want a cake. So we want to begin that process as we start the restoration and renovation of the houses. And then looking beyond that, I mentioned it earlier, we need to remain engaged and involved as this process unfolds, because there are opportunities for us to continue to be advocates for this community and for others who have been wronged throughout the city over time. We're not the only ones, and I think there is definitely the window is open, and it will close unless we make sure it stays open. So I'd love to take questions and see if anyone has any thoughts, not only about this in the future, but over the last 2 days, and see what you think. Anyone?
Thanks so much, Nolbert, for sharing that vision, which I think is really compelling. I wanted to know a bit more about how you were describing the community engagement process of figuring out kind of, we, CU Denver, have to see what the community is interested in. I think I don't fully understand the relationship between starting a renovation on a particular house, which is that your vision? Is that the community vision? I love a renovated house. That sounds good to me, but I wasn't understanding the relationship between those two parts of your project.
Sure, good question. So what we have talked about and what we've heard from folks over the last year has been that they would like to see the houses used in a more student-facing or community-facing way. And so whether that's Latino research or Native American studies or whatever it might be that is community-facing or specifically student-facing. For example, CU Denver has a staff person, Isuri, who is solely responsible for determining, a folks' eligibility. We want folks to be able to find her, right? And other student services as well. But it could be Latino student services or African-American student services, but either student-facing or community-facing. So that's sort of our guiding principle. None of those decisions really have been made in terms of what that actually looks like or who or how, but that's sort of the North Star as it relates to the houses. And then as we begin the engagement process about the park, I mean, we're really doing what we hope everyone will want to engage in, because, CU Denver doesn't own the park, right? AHEC does, but someone has to start the conversation. And so we're just inviting everyone to begin that process. But like I say, it's not begun yet. The Museum of Memories actually is a really good example of other folks stepping up and saying, we can play an important part in that. We CU Denver, we don't have to do everything. We want to engage everyone to do their part. And the fact that History Colorado has done Museum of Memories before in other communities, Fort Garland and Pueblo and other places, they're doing it in Northwest Denver, is wonderful because they, number one, they have resources, expertise, and a way to sort of catalog those things, which we don't generally have the ability to do. So it's an open invitation to folks and organizations and experts to engage with us in that process. But we want to get it started. Good question.
I was listening to what you said about the plans and particularly for the library with the reception desk. And I don't know if you remember, but I'm the person that was spearheading the effort working with the community to give them what they wanted, which was a museum permanently on campus and a permanent memorial. And basically, if you remember, we were going to be in the Tivoli. And then when your whole idea of putting things in the library came up, that was abruptly stopped. And I was just listening to what you said and you didn't mention the museum at all. Is that still part of the plans to go along with the reception desk, or has this been sidetracked?
So as I mentioned, that the library is a place for us to get something now. The conversation, as I understand it, about the Tivoli was going to require money to renovate a space
That's
that no one had. So why would we raise money to renovate a space when we already have space in the library that doesn't need to be renovated? And so that was part of, and the fact that the library is where information is already collected, right? And available. So it made more sense if the purpose was to give folks what they want now, and we can still work towards a museum, a longer term home for that. But like I said, I'm not willing to accept, me personally, this is just my opinion, I'm not willing to accept a 10-year vision for a museum if we can have some place where we can go today or tomorrow at the end of the semester. We can still work towards that, and I completely support that, but I don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good.
So is there a spot in the library that's being planned
Yes.
for a museum space?
Well,
Because I share your impatience, like you
Yes.
said.
there
And
is.
don't want to keep talking about it.
Yes, it's in the works. Absolutely. It's in the library. I can't tell you exactly where in the library, but there is space in the library where that exact and where CCD, my understanding is CCD is wanting to have sort of hours for their person that they are hiring to make sure that students qualify for the scholarship will be, just as CU Denver is, and Metro is supportive of that. So it's a space where they'll be able to access information as well as staff in that way. Okay, we could talk more after. Yes.
Thanks. There's a couple ideas that I've really been ruminating on lately, and one of them is the idea of planning or land use planning as sacred and spiritual practice. And you're one of the few people that's saying that out loud, so thank you for doing that today. I really appreciate your talking about the blessing on 9th Street. I'm curious about other ways that we can welcome in and draw on those blessings in ways that traditional planning has not even tried to do. So that's one thing that's been ruminating that I'd love your thoughts on. And the other is that as institutions, we're getting better at inclusion and diversity because we're getting better at representation and asking more voices and et cetera. We're still not great at equity, and we can hardly comprehend justice because justice is an action that happens every day and we're stuck in the minutia of it. So how do we get, our conversations a little bit past representation so that we can get to reconciliation, restoration, and ultimately things like reparations, beyond the small gift of, a few houses on 9th Street, a beautiful start, but so much work to go.
I mean, I support everything you said. I'm in the urban planning program as well. So I completely understand and read about every day the mistakes that have been made in the past, and certainly I don't want to repeat those. And part of the effort is beginning with community and starting from there rather than folks sitting at their desks making plans and hoping people will go along with it. In terms of the sacred nature of the space, I would love input on ways that we can continue to honor that, because I believe that is a big part of our responsibility. Thank you.
Another question?
Hi, Nolbert. My name is Caitlin Puga.
I remember you.
Before. Thank you for your words and your support for Auraria, the residents, 9th Street Park. It means a lot to myself, my family, and our neighbors and community. A common theme that I'm seeing throughout these last 2 days is the involvement of all 4 institutions in improving 9th Street, bringing the community together. Seems like it's a challenge to coordinate all those efforts, and I appreciate CU Denver's realization for wanting and needing to do that. But how do we work with AHEC to again bring in a vision for 9th Street that is equitable for all?
That's a really good question. Not an easy question, because AHEC is a model that has not been duplicated or replicated anywhere else. And what we have is an organization that owns the land and the buildings and is supposed to serve the 3 institutions, the individual separate institutions. But that doesn't always work very well, and not as easily as many would like. And that has ebbed and flowed over the years. But I would say that that for some of us, we're willing to move forward without everyone being on board to begin with. We'll invite everyone to participate, but we're not going to wait for everyone to agree before we do something, because that's been the classic stall that communities have to deal with all the time, over time. Is we'll think about it, we'll plan it, we'll put our heads together, and maybe someday we'll do it. And what they're really waiting for is for the energy to dissipate around that issue. And then they may or may not get to it. And my opinion is that, as I said, our window of opportunity is open, and I intend to pass through it and get as many things done as we can before the energy dissipates and the focus turns. And if that means, in our case, moving forward with project management or planning or community engagement, we're going to do it. And I hope that, and I know that Metro and CCD have been very supportive in that. And I encourage them all to participate in it. We're not trying to be the Lone Ranger. We'd like to do it together, but we'll do it by ourselves if we have to.
Norbert, I would love to thank you again for all of your work on behalf of the displaced Aurarians. The question I have, and I don't know if that's a possibility, but I'd like to see the Welcome Center and the museum be on 9th Street if possible in one of those houses and in the future or hopefully near future. So I don't know if that's even a possibility.
I would love to see that as well. I think it makes sense that it would be on 9th Street, whether it is, this is just my opinion. So I'm not, you know, saying, I'm not committing anyone to anything. I'm simply saying that in my opinion, that makes sense. Whether in one of the existing houses or in the lot between the ROTC house and 1050, that's a perfect place to build something. I'd love to see that. And like I say, I'm sure that's a longer term vision, building something I'm referring to, whether using another house that is either occupied by AHEC or one of the other institutions, Metro or CU Denver, is a good conversation to have. And I would be open to continuing to have that conversation, because I agree. I think 9th Street is the perfect place for that in the long run. I do. And thank you. Okay. Thanks so much for coming, everyone. I think we're done.
So we have a closing. I just wanted to say thank you again so much for coming. We're going to have, I don't want to call it an evaluation form, feedback form. And I think some of that feedback is I think we're going to ask, where do we go? You know, what are our next steps forward from this? What are the outcomes? Which I think are so important from these conversations that we've had. So this has been so collaborative and energizing and productive, I think. I've learned so much, and I'm really excited to have engaged with all of you and to have you been here for 2 days. Thank you. And I hope this continues. I really do. I really hope we continue to have these conversations. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for staying. So to close out this symposium, I'd like to welcome Eugene Ridgely up here to the stage for some closing words and a blessing.
Well, hey, ho. It was a good 2 days. There was a lot of talk, a lot of ideals, a lot of sharing of knowledge of your histories and legacies of displacement and removal. I'd like to thank the organization, Timberly, for inviting the Cheyenne Rap folk to be part of this presentation, to give our views and insights of the things that we've gone through in the past. So I'd like to say hello to, thank you, Timberly. All your hard work for this planning and others of your organization for putting this program together. And it did affect a lot of people, you know. And we just all have to continue moving forward and doing the best we can in our lifetimes. I'm going to pray for everyone here today in my Arapaho language. I'm going to ask the Creator to be with all of you, to bless all of you, give you a good life, healthy life. Give thanks to the Creator for putting a lot of these vegetations, this water, animals, wildlife, giving us these gifts so that we can continue on to nourish our bodies. And ask for good travels for everyone and blessings to your families. Well, hey, kakoni, nanana ne khabata ho. The best you want, see it y'all. But that's all Jesus, not for a he ha. For a he ha ha. John your heart to what? John your heart to woo. Nah. That e hey he on. John your heart to woo. Nah. No. The nay golf pussy. At that feet. Hey. John your heart be at. Chikha be at. No. At thee, Seti. Kakoni, Chow. Nani at. Not at thee, Nani he thought. Kakao, such out, now how we need the at thee. Go see the at thee. No, but that's all he at thee. That's a bad hand. Bad say, need to ena. But then, the also then, Johnny then. Not the also then. Nou, genane ene nog. Bij het tegen 15. Nu, wees wel. Nou, nu het je niet bij. Nee, nee, ga ho. Even beefen. Not net en no. Wie gaat het niet? Not net en nebbeti. Oh, niet even niet gaan buiten. De beste was ziet ja. That's all Jesus. Nou, hey, hier. Nou, hoe zag het? Oh,